Tales from the Spacepod is intended for mature, open-minded audiences only. If you are easily offended, I suggest you turn this wacky shit right off. Otherwise, welcome to the pod.
Hey, big guy.
What's crappening?
Not much, buddy. How you doing?
I am doing so fucking amazing.
Tell me why.
Well, because I'm reading this book that tells me to give myself positive affirmations.
That's fair. Yeah.
I'm supposed to tell myself I'm doing amazing.
How you really doing? You're like,
No, I'm not supposed to be honest with myself. Chapter 3, never ever be honest with yourself. I should write a book. I should write a self-help book.
Get off my lawn.
Well, I think a lot of these are such bullshit. It's kind of like, you know, when I was doing filmmaking, DIY filmmaking in the late 90s, early 2000s it wasn't a new thing by any stretch, but a lot of people were getting in on it, and there were more resources than there were earlier years, and there were all these books that were like how to do everything, like how to screenwrite, how to build a boom mic out of a broom and a dog food can, which I did. I did all these things. There's all these amazing tips, and there is some useful shit in there, but after you
how
buy...
to fuck 2 popsicle sticks and a rubber band.
Oh, I see. Some of those I already knew. How to perform oral on the casting couch, Chapter 6. But
really should be Chapter 0. Things you need to know, son.
Before you even get started. In fact, why get through Chapter 0? Why move on?
Yeah, just throw this book away.
You succeeded. These books were piling up in my house, and after you get through 3 or 4 of them, it's like, boy, there's not much meat here, and it seems like at this point I could write my own book because I've collected all the tips from all the other books, and I actually thought about it, but then I was like, this is kind of the whole... I bet there's a lot of self-help shit like this, and it's kind of like one of those things. Well, let's take screenwriting. Well, there's probably 300 books out there at least that you can buy to teach you how to screenwrite, how to adapt your ideas into a screenplay. Well, then you look, well, who is the guy that wrote this? And then you look him up. He wrote a couple of movies that never went anywhere, and then he wrote a book about how to write.
Under Siege 7, and...
It's like, if you're lucky, he wrote Under Siege 7. Mostly it's something that, you know, is more like Groom Lake. A wonderful little picture if you haven't checked that out. You know what I mean? It's like, there's that old saying, which I never agreed with, those who can't do, teach. But maybe those who can't do write self-help books. And I bet this is true with a lot of people who do true self-help. Now, these are DIY books. These are just like, you know, these are kind of like bullshit books, you know, like how to make it or how to make $1 million on eBay. They'll give you the tips. They basically are instruction manuals to get started, right? I always used to marvel at the idea, like, now trace it back. Who wrote this book? Oh, a nobody? And I'm a chump. I'm making this person rich. I spent $15 on a book written by a nobody about a topic that he has not been successful in. Well, tune in next week for an episode of Get Off My Lawn.
Follow Old Man Ron on Twitter. He'll be updating that daily.
I got to get that Twitter started. Lyle, you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can. John Mark's going to be a little bit late, and then later on tonight we are going to have a very special guest, BrianTuohy. We're going to be talking about fixed sports. Now, we did an episode on fixed sports maybe a year or 2 ago, and it was by no means comprehensive. Well, it was Spacepod comprehensive, let's say that.
I was going to say, was the different... how much different was it from any other episode?
But I know that I mentioned Brian's name in his book, The Fix Is In, because I heard him on Coast to Coast AM one night talking about this, and I was like, boy, this would be a really good fit in the paranormal world. I mean, it really is tied to a lot of the things we talk about, and it's handled the same way, the idea of fixed sports, because it's very polarizing. So I am really looking forward to having him on. He's been on many, many shows, so he knows his shit. Before we get moving on to that, it's our Special A's birthday today, so I thought we should wish her a Spacepod happy birthday. We need to have her back on the show sometime soon. It's been far too long, but...
It's been way too long.
Yeah, I think it's been over a year.
She needs a fucking segment, like once a month.
Yeah,
Come on.
That's a great fucking idea. We need to get more running segments.
It could be like Lauren's letters, and everybody just like write in a letter.
Lauren's letters. For some reason, I thought you were going to say Lauren's Lakes, and I was still in.
Yeah, Lauren's tatas.
She's been amazing to have in my life, and she's always down for creative projects. She does the catering every single month for the art shows here at Radar Station Gallery, but most of all, she's just a damn fine pal, and and I know that we all love our solid little A. I like that you guys have all kind of gotten to be, pretty close with her too. Lyle, you've gone on motorcycle rides with her. I mean, that's as close as it gets without, Well, tune in.
All right. Lyle doesn't ride and tell.
Lyle never rides and tell you never. But before we get on to news, I had a mini rant of sorts. Speaking of Old Man Evans, Old Man Evans has another issue.
I'm going to rate this one.
All right,
That's
rate this one.
my stick. Yeah.
I'll be curious. It was after the 50th, maybe 500th Starbucks Christmas Cup post I saw today on Facebook that it occurred to me. This is yet another one of these non-stories being blown up to being the biggest story of the day, and it's been fascinating to watch this one because this is a phenomenon that I've only recently been aware of. We have these every fucking week, and we never seem to realize them at the time, but this phenomena is getting ridiculous. I first started noticing it a few years back when there was this supposed stink about a gay NFL player smooching his lover on TV when he got drafted in the picks. And I noticed all of a sudden there are thousands and thousands of tweets and blog posts and Facebook posts about how everyone is freaking out about it. And I kind of got a little into it. I was like, really? Come on. It was a peck on the lips. People calm down. But the noise just kept building and building and building, and it was all, 100% in support of the gay kiss. Not railing against it or complaining about it. Now, I have very religious and very conservative football lovers in my immediate family. They would have been aware of this, and none of them even mentioned it ever. I heard nobody talking about it except the people mocking the people that were upset by it. And I didn't really think much of it at the time. And now I see this shit every fucking week. And it's the same thing. Now, I'm not saying that there were no people complaining about the gay kiss. I'm certain there were plenty of them. And I'm sure that they were taking to Twitter and Facebook and airing their opinion on it. And I'm not saying that there are no people complaining about Starbucks dropping Christmas prints on their holiday cups. But seriously, look around at all the press and social media that's being spent on this one fucking topic. And out of all of that, how many voices are you actually hearing complaining about the Christmas Cup versus the people complaining about the people complaining about the Christmas Cup? Does that make sense? I'm sorry, I'm just not buying that this is a real fucking story. This is one of those stories. I mean, it is now. It's a real story now because everyone falls for this shit and just starts arguing on Facebook. And before you know it, people forget what they were even arguing about in the first fucking place.
What's the gist of this? I have not even had.
So Starbucks apparently used to run, about this time of year, you would see their holiday cups ushered out. They were red instead of the usual white, and they had weird shit like snowflakes. Maybe there's a Santa. The one I saw had like a UFO or something. It was just like little cartoony shit. It was non-denominational. I don't even remember ever seeing anything saying the word Christmas on it. So this idea of Christians being upset that Starbucks is part of the war on Christmas, I don't know. That part didn't even make sense to me. I know that this exists. I know that Christians do freak out whenever the word Christmas is taken out. So I know that that's a thing, but the premise is that a bunch of people are whining because Starbucks is no longer as festive as they were last year. But we're talking about snowflakes and like a kid throwing a snowball. It's like little cartoony shit. We're not talking about a cross or something that says Merry Christmas.
Yeah, just holiday icons, that just reminds you of that winter festive shit. I just want to. When the fuck did we all get just offended by everything?
Hypersensitive.
I don't know that we are. This is my point. It's my point exactly, because out of all the voices, almost all of them, and this goes back to the gay thing, almost all of them that I heard about that were people complaining about people being up in arms over it. I never heard a single soul in my, again, very religious, very conservative, immediate group of family and friends. I never heard anybody complaining about it at all. Yet I heard voices reigning on high complaining about people complaining about it. This is a new phenomena, and it is getting out of control, where we say, oh, come on, people, calm down. Everyone's freaking out. But people aren't really freaking out about it. Here in America, we are blessed with the freedom of press. And it must make anyone who ever died defending that and many of our other freedoms roll in their fucking graves to see what we are using it for. Anyway, I'm just sick of seeing these. Oh my God, people are freaking out about this. Calm down. And in reality, nobody is really freaking out about it. Yeah, maybe you can go to Twitter and find me 500, maybe even 2,000 tweets about people complaining about it. And then I can point to you the 500 million tweets about people complaining about the people complaining about it. It drives me fucking insane.
What are we talking about?
Old man Ron is giving his latest diatribe.
I'll give it to you in a nutshell. The whole thing, the latest, I'm not going to call it a distraction story because that sounds like old man conspiracy theory, Evans, but I'll say this non-story of people being bent out of shape over the whole Starbucks cup, no longer putting
stupid
patterns over it. But my point is, you might have 5,000 people complaining about the cup. That turns into 10 million people complaining about the 5,000 people complaining about it. And all you see, all you hear are people complaining about the people complaining. And that is weird to me that other people don't seem to fucking realize that. Like, we take these little whiny bitches that are real, they exist, they're out there, and then we amplify their whines by 10 fucking million, and we suddenly give them more of a platform. But all we're doing is making it worse. Right. And we're hogging all the fucking... It's unbelievable how many people are spending their press time on this fucking story. It's completely bullshit journalism, and it's empty, and it's lazy, and it further devalues the already laughable American media.
Oh, it's just, it's the news version of pop music. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's easy and it's lazy because it's like... You're being told to like this, or you're being told to listen to this and have an opinion about it. You are told
that this is the thing that you need to focus on, at least for today, maybe this week, and next week it'll be something else. But that's exactly it. I don't know. It's funny because we talk about Fox News. Oh, yeah, Fox News, they're slanted to the right. Oh, well, CNN, maybe they're slanted to the left, somewhere toward the middle. MSNBC definitely slants to the left. We talk about bias in journalism, but if you are really looking at it, forget the tone that the stories are being told in. They're still talking about the same 4 or 5 stories. Why is that? Why does Fox News have to be talking about the same 4 or 5 stories that the rest of them are? Aren't there a million news stories happening right now, and can't we all sort of just be talking about and cover a story that the other 3 networks aren't covering, or vice versa?
Well, Ron, I was sitting at a solid 3.5. But your tenacity when you came back and retold the story to John Mark, who missed it the first time, really bumped it up to a solid 4.7 for me.
4.7. Not bad. Not bad. Listen, I understand. That's pretty good for it being a rant about a non-story. And here I am ranting about it for fucking 5 minutes.
Extra Life went great. We had like 16 people in my house. I could not believe the amount of people and screens we squeezed into this place. But we ended up raising, you're not on the team yet, but we ended up raising over $7,000 already. So
well, I'll make it 8 as soon as I get my lazy ass up there, and I'll do that tonight.
Nice. You're like, I'll make it 75.
You mind if I take a withdrawal? I'm going to take it down to 6,800. Daddy needs a new pair of shoes, but no, that's good. Yeah, it was a weird Extra Life this time because it kind of snuck up on me, and you weren't part of it with me, and I don't know, it was odd. I think we'll get back on target next year, but $8,000, that's a chunk of dough. I feel good about that.
Yeah, and every buck goes to helping kids get treatment they need, so there you go.
Awesome.
I think we've done it again. Well, there's lots of reports popping up and dozens of videos of this thing cruising across the night sky in Los Angeles. Do you guys see this?
Wasn't it the testing of some military missile or something?
That's what they want you to think.
Well, that's what the government wants you to think.
Son of a bitch.
Well, it was funny because this is one of those huge sightings. Even Kim Kardashian tweeted about her sighting of it in a little video.
Oh, my God.
It was one of those things that thousands of people saw it and were kind of freaking out. And there is some really interesting video of it. And people were thinking it might be a meteor or space junk re-entering the atmosphere. That's appropriate following Kim Kardashian. Right. Oh, my God, it's re-entering my atmosphere. It probably does have her own atmosphere.
Jesus.
But it was definitely going upward, so it didn't really fit those things. And it just kind of snuffs out. But then the Navy Strategic Systems Programs claims that, yes, they conducted a scheduled Trident II missile test flight from a seaborne submarine in the Pacific Test Range. So, of course, this won't appease everyone, but if the military says they launched a missile, it's a case closed as far as the mainstream media is concerned. Now, I've seen missiles before in launches at night, and they have looked a lot like this. The Norway Spiral, I remember we talked about that, was supposedly a similar type of rocket that failed and spiraled into the sky, making what looks like a giant wormhole opening up.
Yeah,
Remember that?
I looked at some of those pictures again today because I've been seeing all these pictures, and people were saying, "Oh, it's a missile test" and all this stuff, and I was like, "Really? Does it really look like that?" And so I googled, missile contrails and missile tests and all that stuff, and it's like, maybe, but most of the pictures that are out there don't look like that. You know what I mean?
Well, there's something that happens in this video, in the photos. The best photos capture this sort of aura that's around this thing. Sort of a football-shaped glow to it.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. It's beautiful to watch, and I can only imagine being under. And you know how your phone, you can hold it up. The moon can just look huge on the horizon, and then you take your phone out to get video or picture of it, and it just looks like a fucking pimple. Just shrinks it down. So if you're getting pretty good, clear video and photos of this thing, imagine being in the presence of it. It must have been pretty intimidating, and people were freaking the fuck out. The Norwegian Spiral is a much harder one for me to buy. I think when we talked about that missile, they posted a pretty convincing video underneath the Norwegian Spiral video that showed a rocket during daylight hours that was sort of spiraling out, but it was spiraling all over the place. The Norway Spiral was really interesting because it looked like you were spinning one of those hypnotism wheels. It was locked in place.
Then there was the weird beam coming out of the center of it.
Where it looked like it just fucking opened up, and it looked like the sky behind that was dark. This all could be an optical illusion. I buy that it could be something that was spiraling out of, but at the same time, it's harder for me to buy that one than this one. I would swallow that this one is a missile, but no one seems to be bothered by the fact that they're launching missiles just outside of city limits,
And at night, too. That's
right.
weird,
Where's all the outrage?
It's just like, sure, they're saying it's a dummy missile.
That's when the government's like, Starbucks, initiate code red cup.
Remove the snowflake, outrage the Christians. Yeah, fucking weird times. Weird times. Well, there's another possible candidate in the ever-growing list of Jack the Ripper suspects. This time it's a well-known poet. I was digging this theory. Francis Thompson. He was, now in his younger days, he had very specific surgical training that apparently perfectly lines up with the type of dissections found in most of the Ripper's victims. And those close to Thompson say that he always kept a dissection knife in his coat. Always.
You never know when you're going to need it,
You
right?
never know. You never know when one of them bitches down on Main Street is going to turn you down for your tokens.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
But he was a known opium addict, and he had traceable ties to at least one of the East End prostitutes, which, of course, were the Ripper's prey of choice. Apparently, this relationship ended so badly that, as so many hookups do, that the theory is that he snapped and went on a killing spree in vengeance. Now, that part of it is a little weak. That hooker done me wrong, so I'm going to go kill, I don't remember how many Ripper victims there were, but let's say a dozen. That sounds a little bizarre, but especially with that, Jack the Ripper is such an interesting and unique and intimate case. Like, his victims, there was some, it's almost as if he was wronged personally by every one of those girls. The way that he dissected them, it was like, what the fuck was he doing? Such a fascinating case, and it shocks people even to this day. That's pretty impressive. This was the late 1800s where Jack the Ripper was roaming the streets, and it still shocks us when we hear about the details of that case.
Nuts.
And Thompson, I guess, details a very specific bloody murder of a woman stabbed at a pagan temple by a young poet. Remember, this guy's a poet. In one of his short stories, Finis Coronat Opus. Here's a little quote. And listen to this, and imagine it being somebody who moonlights as a serial killer, and by day he's a fucking well-known poet. I swear I struck not the first blow. Some violence seized my hand and drove the poniard down. Whereat she cried, and I frenzied, dreading detection, dreading above all her wakening. I struck her again, and again she cried, and yet again she cried.
Jesus.
Pretty interesting that we're still guessing at this, too. I always wondered if there weren't many Rippers, or at least more than one. But it seems like it was the work of one madman or mad woman. There's a couple of female suspects in this whole charade, but every few years it seems like we hear about another relatively plausible suspect.
Do you think we'll ever have a definitive answer?
I don't know how we could unless there was some DNA. I mean, that would be the only way you can conclusively. I don't know that there's anything. I suppose some of these corpses are in a grave somewhere that they could be exhumed, and a tissue sample could be looked over. But I don't know. It would be it would have to take DNA. It's the only way.
Yeah.
Call Scotland Yard.
Call them. You want to give us a little Sean Connery there?
I'm not gonna. No, but you could imagine, like Scotland Yard's probably got an archive that's something pretty spectacular. You would think. I really can't do a good Sean Connery. It's come too long. I haven't practiced it enough. Sean Connery? No. Ron could probably do a better Sean Connery than I can right now.
Should have melded to the Marx Brothers. It's my Sean Connery is not really Sean Connery. It's a Sean Connery impersonation. Like I impersonate other people impersonating Sean Connery.
Yeah, that's fair.
Although I fucked it up. I should have just said Sean Connery. There is an official petition going on in Australia that really warmed my heart this morning, and it's gaining steam. In fact, probably as we speak, it has collected the appropriate number of signatures. But the initiative is to change the name of Australia's currency to Dollarydoos. Dollarydoos, inspired by The Simpsons, of course, but the petition is expected to hit its goal of 7,500 signatures, which gets it to the next level of consideration. But how awesome would it be to call your money Dollarydoos? 700 Dollarydoos? Why, that's a ripoff. But you could seriously give me the biggest bill. Mr. Evans, your transmission will be 3,200 Dollarydoos. My response would be, I'll pay with pledge.
All right.
Dollarydoos. I don't know. I love Australian humor. Although that's straight out of Simpsons. What you guys got before we get on to our evening's guest?
We all know about the mansion that Stephen King wrote his horror novel about, The Shining.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm not sure if it's up for sale. It's or whatnot, but there are a lot of people trying to get it bought and used as a horror museum.
Yeah, I saw that.
There's actually a lot of actors in Hollywood that have contributed to the cause, which is like Elijah Wood and Simon Pegg.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I wonder. So, what is the idea behind it? I mean, like horror museum. What does that mean? like you would go in and see like props from certain horror movies?
I'm assuming so. I'm assuming something on the lines of that. They raised over $11.5 million. It'd be cool. I would take the journey. I would say road trip. Let's go to Colorado, man. It'd be a fun one.
Yeah. No, for sure. Well, just to be in that hotel would be fun.
Well, supposedly the place is haunted. I mean, there was the basing of the books. The book that Stephen King wrote. Mm-hmm. A lot of that shit came to him while he was staying there. Then ghost hunters and stuff like that have been there and went through the ghost hunted through it. So
I think hotels would be like hospitals. A great place to hunt for ghosts because there's so many stories, so many experiences. We talk about all the time. I don't know. Hunting for ghosts in graveyards makes sense because if there's any kind of tie between this world and the netherworld, then you're going to be tied to what was once you, right? And if there's a pile of your bones somewhere, maybe you feel connected. It's a weird thing to think about, feeling connected to the only thing you know as you that's rotting in the ground somewhere. But for the most part, I think a lot of us prefer the thought of haunting places that meant something to us. Not where we ended up or necessarily where we died, but where we had certain good experiences. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I would think that where you die, depending on how the manner of your death, would be a more likely place, especially if it was something super traumatic or something like that.
Something quick, something violent.
Like a car accident or, But what would be cool is if they actually had it set up as a museum, but you could stay there overnight.
Yeah, for sure. They have to, no matter what they do with it, they have to at least have some of those rooms, like the room numbers from, I don't remember any of them off the top of my head, but the famous ones from the movie, you have to have those available for staying in.
Would you stay there? I mean, would you go there on vacation?
Yeah, I don't freak out about stuff like that. It might not be my most restful night's sleep, but I wouldn't be afraid to sleep there, sure. It'd be fun.
Speaking of haunted hotels, you guys may or may not have known this, but that new season of American Horror Story?
Mm-hmm.
I guess it was inspired by that. Was it Eliza Lamb? Is that her name?
I don't know.
Remember the girl who was in that hotel in L.A. and they found her in the water tank?
Oh, that's right.
Oh, yeah.
Apparently, this season of American Horror Story, since it's based in a hotel in L.A., was inspired by that.
Oh,
Corpse
I didn't
water.
know that. Boy, that's
Corpse
interesting.
water. That's that
Yeah.
one fucking expression Ron kept using
Corpse
over and over
water.
again.
Corpse water. How's the water tonight? I don't know. It's corpsey. It's kind of corpsey. Boy, that's interesting because there's that one really chilling video of her before she gets on that elevator where she's clearly, now, of course, it appears to be mental illness or something, but let's say it's not. Let's say she actually, because she's like having a heated conversation or argument. It's like she's wrestling with somebody. Like, I don't want to go, or I don't want to, fighting with somebody that's not there. And then she gets on the elevator, and the next thing you have corpse water, and she's found days later in the fucking water tank. Crazy story.
And there's all that stuff. It's like there's no way that she could have gotten into that tank by herself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just like
that was a weird story that disappeared really quickly, didn't it? See, that story
Kinda,
we should be talking about more. Instead of fucking coffee cups.
Right.
Exactly.
Interesting stuff. Ooh, I like that idea. Chris, what you got?
Man, I've got an eerie story that popped up on my radar, and you know how I have a penchant for these weird stories of the bizarre and wrongdoings, maybe.
The bizarre and wrongdoings. A new segment on Tales from the Spacepod.
Oh, boy. All right. This is a story about a young woman in 1876 in France that just disappeared. She was 25 years old. And she just fucking disappeared. And her mom was kind of a high society type. And they mourned her as if she ran away or was gone. And that was that. Fucking 25 years later. It's like 1901, excuse me. The Attorney General in France gets a anonymous letter that says, listen, some serious shit's going down at this house. You need to go check them shits out. So they go. And they're inspecting the house, and they find this padlocked fucking room. They open up the room, and this is the fucking sight that they see. Can I go ahead and just text you guys? This is the actual
God, if
photo.
this is another yet elaborate setup for a dick pic.
Fool us once.
She was kept in a room for 25 years, basically, by her mother because she did not like the gentleman suitor she chose. She weighed just 55 pounds when the police found her.
Ew.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Oh, this. Ew.
Yeah.
Boy, what we got here is this picture wouldn't look out of place in a Holocaust photo.
No.
Literally skin and bones. I'm having a hard time averting my eyes from that hip bone, although I desperately want to avert my eyes. Not the kind of hip bone you'd want to snort a rail of coke off.
Nor snuggle up to.
Oh, pointy.
Yeah, poor thing. So
what's the story here?
She was kept in the room until she would basically renounce her love for the lawyer she wanted to court, and her mom wouldn't let her. So she chained her up in her room.
Oh, boy, this is one of those
25
things
years.
where, okay, you go 3-4 days tops. Once
Yeah.
you realize old mom is serious about them shits, you fucking renounce, and then you get the fuck out of there.
You pull up plentyoffish.com and see what's up.
I mean, I appreciate her fucking conviction, but...
Yeah, I know. So it was pretty sad, but she had good spirits when she was rescued. The people that were washing her, she was commenting on how nice it was to see the sunlight again. She was in generally
God, that's
general,
heartbreaking.
isn't it? It's fucking.
I can't wait to suck his dick. We forgot to tell you, he married 2 months ago.
Yeah, you married 2 months after you were missing.
Some heavy girl. He doesn't like skinny bitches.
So I'll post the link to this story. It's a really fascinating and tragic story, but
Yeah.
one worth checking into.
Ugh.
If you like that kind of stuff.
Ooh, and I do not. That's a troubling photo. Although she does look like she's trying to be happy and making the best of it. But
I wasn't prepared for guests.
oh, I don't have my face on. Jesus Christ!
Oh my God.
Literally helped me put it back on. It fell off 2 weeks ago. Hey, who wants in? I'm a horrible human being who's going straight to Hades.
I got one more if we got time for it. I'm going to send you a video here. What you want to do is probably just fast forward it to about the 3-minute mark.
About the cum shot.
But yeah, no, it's the ending there. Quicker.
Okay.
So here's the glitch or the glitch.
Tell us the glitch, La. What's the glitch here?
Here's the story. There was two men that were walking out of an Ohio restaurant. I've seen a lot of different shapes of UFOs, from like cigar shapes to triangles, but this one is the maniacal metal butterfly. You know what the story reminds me of is actually the Venture Brothers, the Monarch.
You're right.
It's the butterfly. Right?
Was down here at some point with
Okay, so I'm only seeing still
glowing lights,
photos of this so far.
that simply don't jive with anything you'd imagine.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so now I'm seeing some close-ups of it. It does look like, okay, well, there's no doubt it was, if this was built, it was built to look like a monarch butterfly. And it seems to have lights that look like spaceship lights. And it's just floating there in the sky. Now, is there footage of it actually moving? I'm only seeing stills.
It's a long video. I laughed at the guys, the commentator's voice.
Let's listen a little bit here.
Awesome job in getting both images and video of this thing. This is what we ask of all of you guys. Get as much footage as possible. Keep your camera steady. Get video and images if you can, and send it in to us. And because this just happened, we are hopeful that more footage will be posted. With which they were flying past. The father and son both described this craft as silent, eerily silent. They also pointed out, which you can also see in the video footage, that at one point, just as the craft is almost disappearing into the horizon, you can see two distinct flashes of light appearing on either side of the craft, but not touching said craft. You can see those lights in this clip here. Now, here's where things get very interesting. If you'll remember, Secure Team posted a video a couple weeks ago of what looks to be a massive TR-3B-style triangular craft caught hiding in the night skies, caught by a man while on his back porch who had just happened to be out back for a smoke at around midnight. And in that footage, we too can see a set of lights flash, similarly to what we see here on the outside of the craft. These lights do not touch the craft in both videos, and flicker on the outside of the craft in the same way within both of these sightings.
Interesting.
There's a little detail into it. It's definitely, I wouldn't say it's man-made. It's
freaky.
It's definitely.
It looks big. That's what freaks me out.
The butterfly. I don't know if I'd like to see that flying over me.
Cobra.
I've seen enough shit in the sky.
It's true. I don't want you to see any more shit in the sky.
I don't either.
Can we just call it off there, Ron?
Call it a day.
Call it good.
A day. Well, let's say we get our guest on here.
Let's do it.
Tonight's guest is, as I mentioned earlier, BrianTuohy, author of The Fixes in, Larceny Games, and more recently, A Season in the Abyss. Brian, thanks so much for joining us tonight on the Spacepod. I'm very excited to talk to you.
Well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
This is we're going to be talking fixed sports. This is a very touchy subject. I would wager that, and we'll talk more about wagering in a bit, but I would wager that more people are willing to believe in the existence of Bigfoot, the reality of alien anus probing, than the notion that their beloved team didn't legitimately win the Super Bowl. And you are essentially a whistleblower. I mean, you must get blowback all the time.
Well, it's kind of funny because on one hand, people will tell me that after talking to me that I ruin sports for them, that they can't watch them the same way after, I get into it. But at the same time, it's funny because all the email I get, and I get a lot of email, is 100% positive.
Oh, really?
I mean, so people who find me always say, basically a lot of times they'll say, thank you for doing this, which it makes me feel really good, and it kind of inspires me to keep going because, all the email is always extremely positive, and people are happy that, it's like they had this feeling, too, that something wasn't right, and when they found me, it kind of confirmed that idea for them.
Oh, that's interesting. Because you're not just watching these games and calling bullshit. You're actually digging through FBI files and gathering some pretty compelling evidence. I want to know what lit this fire in you to begin with.
What it is I don't like being lied to, and I don't care what the subject is. I don't like people telling me one thing and finding out later that it's something else. And what happened, I think, for me is my brother always bet on football and sports, and every once in a while he would say, that game had to be fixed because there's no way this, that, or the other thing would happen. And I always kind of was, interested in it. But then there was two books I read. One was called Interference by a guy named Dan Moldea. The other one was called They Call It a Game, which was written by a former NFL player named Bernie Parrish. And both of those books kind of opened my eyes because Bernie Parrish, his book was written before Moldea's, he kind of alleged that he thought that once, big-time television bought into professional football, that it literally bought football and changed the game.
Mm-hmm.
And he thought that it became an entertainment spectacle and not a sport, and that things were really just geared for entertainment purposes. And then Moldea's book was written really about game fixing from a gambling perspective, and it talked about really how dirty the NFL was. And when I kind of put those two things together and started doing my own research, that's when it kind of all came together for me.
Yeah. Is it actually illegal to rig professional sports or any sports?
No, that's the scary part. It's outright frightening that, and this is some of the research I did, is there's no law that prevents a league like the NFL or the NBA, Major League Baseball, any of them, from fixing their own games, from manipulating their own games. And there's two laws that come close. I mean, there's one, the old quiz show scandal, if anybody's ever seen the movie Quiz Show,
yes,
where the television networks were rigging the game shows, basically for the same thing I say the NFL might be rigging its games, is to make them more entertaining, draw more fan interest, get more people hooked on it. And when that law was passed in the 50s, it specifically mentioned intellectual contests, which, of course, sports are not intellectual contests, they're physical contests. So the law doesn't apply there. And the other law that exists is from 1964, and it's called the Sports Bribery Act. And that says you cannot bribe a player, coach, or referee to alter the outcome of a game. Well, if a league is telling, like its referees, for example, we want you to call a game in a certain way, and that favors one team over the other, well, that's not bribery. That's just an employer telling an employee how to do their job. So that law doesn't apply either. So the only thing that comes close is fraud. And yet when fans have sued the league, the NFL and other leagues as well, for various ticket infractions, one famous one was the Spygate incident with the New England Patriots, the law has always said, look, what your ticket is it's a license granted to you from the league that says, in this case, like you're allowed to see an NFL game. It doesn't mean the game has to be played by any certain rules. It doesn't mean certain players have to participate. It doesn't mean it wasn't fixed. You pay to see a football game. They provided that football game. End of story.
Wow, that's really interesting that there's no laws against this specifically.
I can't believe that.
Yeah.
Well, I got a quick question. I need an expert to actually verify this. I was always told that the NFL, they were tax exempt, and I'm not sure when that changed or if it did. Is that true?
They were a non-profit organization.
The NFL was a non-profit organization?
Not the individual teams, but the league office, basically. Yes. Yeah. They were, and this is kind of interesting if you look throughout the history of sports. This is one of those times where the government, a lot of times, have given in to professional sports to allow them certain things like this. They actually specifically wrote a law that said the NFL can be a non-profit organization, and they have been. And it wasn't really until, supposedly this past year or so that they gave that up, this tax-exempt status, because it was a distraction, they claimed, because too many people were pointing it out.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
said,
we were talking billions and billions of dollars. Of course, it's no mystery why the government can get behind it. They're getting their share. They're fine. But holy shit, I didn't know that.
Yeah, when you get into the tax thing, when players get fined, they get fined by the league for this, that, or the other thing, they can actually claim that fine because the money that they paid to the league, it goes to a lot of the league's charities.
Wow, this is making me furious.
They claim that on their taxes as a charitable donation.
Oh, fuck you. That makes me so angry.
Yeah, this is already making me angry. We're just beginning to. Well, I want to hang it right there.
This is what I do to people. I'm sorry. This is what happens.
But this is the thing, though. We here on the Spacepod are up in sunny Washington State, and we are long-suffering Seahawks fans. And 2 years ago, we were treated to a spectacle that many of us never dreamed we would. A dominating Super Bowl victory. It was amazing, an amazing time for a young gal. And up here, the last thing that we wanted to hear about was the idea of rigging. However, cut to the very next Super Bowl, and we would love nothing more than to think that there's some shenanigans involved there with that last bungholed play. Do you have any theories on that game specifically?
Well, here's the thing, and here's what I was getting into, is I don't think every game's fixed.
Sure.
Right? I don't think it's all scripted like professional wrestling.
Right.
I think what happens is the league can see certain profit and motivation from having certain players or certain teams succeed above and beyond what they probably should. Like the Tim Tebow thing. I don't think the Tim Tebow thing was legitimate. I think that's something the league saw and kind of pushed into being, and that's why Tim Tebow had that one like half a year and disappeared. Because they just couldn't push it anymore. He just really wasn't that good, but they did all they could and got the most out of it. And I think that's what they do. Is I think they can milk certain situations by either getting people to lay down, they can get their referees to call certain things or not call certain things.
So you thought
and they
that
can manipulate even games into the fourth quarter just to make them interesting until the final gun. So, I mean, for me to say, hey, that Super Bowl was fixed, I think it's a possibility, sure. Do I think it, can I prove it? No, and that's part of the problem.
Right.
Is proving it.
Well, it is key that you noted you don't think every single game or match is fixed. And that's something that I don't think a lot of because I've seen you on some other shows and some of the players, like the NFL players or NBA players that they might have had as guests, get super defensive, which you can understand on one level, but they're not thinking of it. Like, I think they see you as calling them all liars. You're calling them all cheats and fakes, and that's not what you're saying at all. You're saying all you need to fix a game is one ref in on the take or one player with a gambling debt, which we're going to talk about. That's a huge difference from saying that the whole thing is scripted like the professional wrestling circuit. It's a very different thing.
Oh, exactly. And, I mean, there was a gambler who one time said, if you give me a quarterback, an offensive lineman, and a defensive back, I can give you any NFL game you want. Those three guys.
That's interesting.
And I think you could even do it with one guy. Just the right time and the right place, and they can do things that'll change the outcome of a game, and that's all you need, just to sway a game a little way, one way or the other. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think everybody would be involved in the sex, because they always hear this, if this was happening and there'd be so many people involved, somebody would talk about it. And I don't believe that. I mean, for one, people do and can keep secrets.
We keep secrets. We're people. That's what we do. We keep big secrets. So, yeah, that's easy to believe.
I mean, you think about the guys who built, like, the underground bases that the United States government has, and the people who know the nuclear secrets and stuff like that. They keep those things secret.
Yeah.
I mean, they can do it.
Sure.
And when you look at, like, a sports, an athlete, if a player, for example, was involved in this and was directly involved in this, what does he have to gain by making it public? It's absolutely nothing to gain by being a whistleblower. There's no money in it. There's not millions of dollars attached to revealing this secret by any means. All you have to do actually gain is ridicule.
Sure.
By bringing this stuff up, but you're not going to have proof.
Yeah. Do you believe? Let's stick with.
That's the thing.
Let's stick with the NFL for a little bit. Do you believe that let's say an entire season could be contrived? Do you imagine a scenario where this news story or this one area or this team is coming from this city had a terror incident or a tough economy last year? It sure would be great to see that team win this year. Do you think it goes that far into constructing, if we're going with this is all about entertainment now, very expensive money-making entertainment, do you think that it goes that far into contriving that?
I think the New Orleans Saints is the best example of that.
After
that
Katrina?
Team, after Hurricane Katrina, was decimated. They were terrible. And yet they brought in an entire new coaching staff that replaced like 2/3 to 3/4 of the roster, and they made it to the NFC Championship game, which by all means should not have happened. But it was the revival of New Orleans. And look how the NFL played on that. I mean, they really constantly played on the fact that, like, literally the New Orleans Saints, the 53 guys on that team, rebuilt the entire city single-handedly.
Right.
And that was the whole push. And it lasted for a couple of years. It got them all the way to the Super Bowl, and they won the Super Bowl. I think that's one thing that was entirely contrived.
Yeah. Well, there's no question that you have a story that's going to get people who don't give two shits about football tuning in. The pieces, I mean, if you're being honest, the pieces to this sort of start falling into place without a lot of, bending over. But, I mean, we can talk about motive, and, of course, you just say money. Once you say money, you can kind of believe just about anything. But I want to take a look at how this actually works, because and we're going to get into the gambling angle in a bit, but let's look at the leagues themselves. These are billion-dollar monsters that are tied to other billion-dollar corporations. They are tied to sponsors that shell out billions in advertising. They sell official team memorabilia. They fill stadiums all over the country. This is a lot of mouths suckling on the teat of professional sports, and it all lives and dies by whether or not people are looking at it. So that's all the motivation you need to, at least tweak some things here and there, but it has to be gripping, and in this day and age especially, you really have to be gripping to keep people's attention.
Well, and that's the thing, is that they basically, like you talk about, I mean, there's billions upon billions of dollars on the backs of all this, and yet supposedly it's all left up to coincidence, that happy accident.
Yeah.
And what multi-billion-dollar industry operates in that way?
That's an interesting
when
look.
it has the very real ability to control what happens on the field or on the court or whatever, why would you not take that control when you can? When you legally can control it? I mean, the analogy I like using is, if you look at McDonald's, and if McDonald's discovered some sort of new food additive that it could stick in its hamburgers that the FDA approved that would make the hamburger taste better every time you took a bite of it, McDonald's would stick it in their meat tomorrow.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
And that's exactly what the NFL and all these major leagues can do. They can make their games more interesting while you're consuming them and do so legally. So why would we think they wouldn't do that? That's the thing. Why wouldn't they do it? It's the best business decision for them to make. And like you said, they're multi-billion-dollar industries invested in this sort of thing. So I think it's just rational to think that these things are manipulated because, remember, it is entertainment.
Sure.
They admit they're entertainment. And even the NFL says before and after every game, the following or preceding is a presentation of the National Football League. What does presentation mean?
Yeah.
Think about it.
That's interesting. That's a lot of dollary-doos. Now, gambling is, of course, the other motivator. Are players betting on their own games, sometimes even against? I mean, they have to be, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's the interesting thing, too, is I find that, since really the Pete Rose scandal, which was late 1980s, no player that I can really find has ever been in trouble for gambling. In any league, in any sport, really. I mean, you can look at players who get arrested for DUIs, domestic violence, child abuse, guns, drugs, whatever. You can find them in trouble for everything across the board except gambling.
That's true. It's always outside of the game.
That's interesting. I never thought of that. That's true, though.
And I mean, and they've done studies. They've done surveys of the NCAA athletes and the college football players and basketball players, who, of course, many of them turned pro, have admitted to not only gambling on their own game, but should get them eliminated from the NCAA, by the way, because betting on their sport is completely verboten. So as soon as they make a bet, they should be ousted. But yet the NCAA only has one investigator for the entire country into gambling on their sport. Wow. So you can see how effective that guy is. But they've done surveys. They've shown that these athletes willingly admit they not only gamble on games, they bet against their teams. They've been approached to fix games, and some have admitted to actually fixing games. But yet none of those scandals make the papers.
Well, of all the scenarios you can imagine with throwing or fixing a game, that one seems pretty simple to me. You bet on the other team, and you just throw your part of the game. Now, there's still an element of chance. Maybe somebody else will step up and save the team, and you win after all. But if you're, as you mentioned, some of those key positions, if you're one of those key players, it's going to be tough to win if you are just flat out throwing it. That's a very viable, doable situation there. And if people get skeptical of the idea that a rich and famous athlete, which, by the way, they're not all rich or famous,
exactly,
but that they would be so stupid as to bet on their own shit and then throw it or take a cut from somebody to throw a game, gambling can become a very serious addiction for people, and it can get you into serious trouble with some pretty serious people, and you could easily find yourself backed into a pretty desperate situation, making you prime for throwing a game. All you need is one of those dudes on a team, and you've got a situation where a major game could be thrown just to get yourself out of trouble. That's not a tough scenario for me to imagine at all.
No, and it shouldn't be. I mean, because if you look outside the United States, if you look at soccer, you look at tennis, you look at cricket, you look at rugby, there have been numerous, hundreds, literally hundreds, if not approaching thousands, of matches fixed. And we know, especially from looking at soccer, which is a major team sport, the biggest sport in the world, we know the biggest sporting event in the World Cup, has seen matches fixed in it by gamblers. I mean, there are literally syndicates out of the Far East that That is what they do. They go around the world fixing matches. They've not only fixed matches, they've created fake national teams, and they've created fake international tournaments.
Really?
Bet on these games and fix them. Oh,
Now,
totally.
that is elaborate.
So, but they'll
I kind
go
of
that
applaud them
far.
at that point. I mean, that's hard. Isn't that harder than winning legitimately? It seems like so many more steps.
But they'll do that. I mean, because obviously there's
sure.
money involved
That's a
in
lot
it.
of
And
money.
yet, like I say, so you could see it all over the world. But here in the United States, we think this is impossible. I mean, I go on, actually ESPN won't let me on, but I've been on numerous radio shows, and I'll have the host say, well, this is impossible. And I say, how? If you can fix the biggest sporting event in the world, and we know it, I mean, we know it without a doubt, that World Cup matches have been fixed in soccer, then, what's a regular NBA game? What's a regular NBA
Oh, absolutely. Well, elaborate on that for a minute. For the people who don't know, what example of the World Cup being fixed, like what evidence do we have of that?
Oh, well, there's a guy by the name of Declan Hill. He's an international investigative reporter, basically, and he wrote a book called The Fix. And he actually went and followed these match fixers out of the Far East, a group of them, and literally trailed them step by step and watched them fix a World Cup soccer match. And he just said how much it broke his heart in the book to know that what was going on out in the field was a lie, because he knew it was controlled.
Yeah.
And there's been other, even older ones if you go back. There was a game fixed. God, I'm trying to remember what the two nations were. Was it two South American countries? But literally, they fixed the game for political reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Like they said, if you fix this game, we'll release these 10 political prisoners we have.
Oh,
they
wow.
did it.
God.
So, that's how
They
far
die-harded the World Cup?
Holy shit. Well, it seems like I remember hearing after 9/11, was it the Patriots, the Yankees? There's some team that was like, boy, wouldn't it be great for New York or America's team to come back in full force immediately after 9/11 as a big middle finger to, those that would do us evil. Did you have any feelings toward that?
Well, the Patriots. The Patriots are the big. Actually, the New York Yankees, I think, if I remember right, they made it to the World Series but lost in 2001. But the Patriots...
And the terrorists won yet again.
Yeah, exactly. They beat us there. But the Patriots came through, and they were, they did a lot of things differently for that Super Bowl. They changed the logo of the Super Bowl to make it more All-American looking, which is very unusual for the NFL to do. A team obviously named the Patriots won, a team that was led by an unknown quarterback named Tom Brady, and a team that refused to be introduced as individuals before the game that came out on the field as a team. And so they kind of pushed this whole Team America, rah-rah, patriotic thing, and the Rams unfortunately got swept away by what happened that day.
Yeah.
But I think that whole thing was, like I say, I don't believe in coincidence. Not when it's tied to billions of dollars. And that was extremely coincidental for it to have just happened.
Sure. It's also key to note that betting on sports games isn't just about win versus lose. You can bet on the point spread. So somebody may be approached not to throw a game, but to do everything you can to keep a certain spread. That's like a home run, because he gets to still win the game and collect a share of the winnings. This must happen all the time in college sports, where the players, and it's incredible to me that the players don't get paid in college sports, because that's another billion-dollar industry, but the players don't make money. I don't know if a lot of people realize that.
Well, and that's what I think makes it so, like you say, so ripe. It's, college kids aren't stupid. Some of them obviously don't really do well in school.
Right.
They're there just to play football or basketball or what have you, but still, they're not dumb enough to realize that, when they step out in the field like at Michigan, there's 100,000 people in the stands. It's being broadcast on national television. Their coach is getting paid $3, $4, $5 million a year, and all this money is being made, and yet here I am, the guy actually doing the work, the one they're cheering for, and I'm not getting a dime. Well, sure, I'm getting my tuition paid, great. But I'm legitimately not making a dime, and yet everyone around me is making millions. And
there's video games with their likenesses on them, and they don't get a cut of that?
Exactly.
That has to drive you crazy.
So I think if somebody comes up to you and says, look, I'll give you $10,000, you don't have to lose the game. Just make sure you don't win by, more than 10 points.
Yeah. How do you say no to that?
You do it? Yeah.
Let's talk a bit about the Olympics, because this is an example where money is not the only motivator. Like you mentioned earlier, the Olympics have long been used as a way to flex a nation's muscle during time of political unrest. And I remember this last Summer Olympics, I think it was the Korean badminton team, were throwing games so laughably that everybody, the announcers, were literally laughing at them, that they were just throwing the games and they were these huffy, puffy little fake tantrums. Now, that was a bit different because that was to place them in an easier next round. But yet, there you have a team clearly throwing a match in one of the world's premier sporting events in 2012. As far as you know, have there been other known Olympic fixes?
That goes without saying. I mean, the same guy, Declan Hill, who wrote about the World Cup being fixed, said that there was Olympic soccer matches fixed when it was held in Atlanta in 2006. I mean, but my favorite one is I got an email, and I get emails all the time from people, you guys probably do too, that you never know how true or how real they really are. But sure. I had an email from a gentleman who said he was a CIA agent, former, and that there's a famous Olympic basketball game played in 1972. It was the gold medal game between the United States and the Soviet Union. And he claimed that what actually happened, because it was a very controversial finish, basically the referees gave the Soviets like 3 chances to score the final game-winning basket with like less than a second left to play, and they ultimately did and won the gold medal. And the United States, to this day, nobody on the team has picked up their silver medals for that game. But the CIA agent claimed that what happened was that the KGB kidnapped one of the referees' families and said, if we don't win, your family dies.
Wow. That is some diehard shit.
Yeah.
Where's Bruce Willis? We need Bruce Willis on the case in this partnership. It's insane. So what are some more recent examples of known fixing? I know that you've got every time you watch a game, you must be like, oh, that's kind of shady there. But as far as like something that we know, we have some sort of proof or evidence, what are a few examples?
Well, that's the problem, is there really isn't nothing
it's hard to prove.
In the United States that you can prove. Again, you look outside... You can look in, like I say, it was the Indian Premier League in cricket is incredibly corrupt, for example, from top to bottom. The cricket league, it includes the owners, the players, the officials, everybody's involved in fixing matches there. I mean, there's like Serie A soccer in Italy, which for 15 years, same thing. Owners, players, referees, organized crime guys are fixing matches, and yet Fox Sports is selling it to Americans as being a premier soccer league to watch.
I've been watching it. I might not anymore. You really do ruin sports for people, Brian.
I do. I know I do.
Well, something many people may not know is that every one of these pro organizations have their own security groups that whenever there is a scandal, I mean, are these sort of like, is it like internal affairs that they are the ones that are the first to investigate when a scandal breaks out?
Well, they have, like I say, the NFL security is one. Major League Baseball has a Department of Investigations, which I've dealt with directly. These are
You're out of here.
You sounded less than pleased about
Brian.
that. Which I've dealt
Finish
with
your hot dog
directly.
outside, punk.
Yeah, that's what it's close to. I could tell you a story about those guys, but they're literally staffed with former members of the CIA, FBI, DEA, local law enforcement. I mean, these are serious cats.
Wow.
And yet, despite their investigative abilities, and it's really actually not much of an investigative ability because they can't subpoena anybody, they can't get anybody under oath, but they exist literally to cover things up. Because I can't find a single example, and I've looked around for literally years, where a law enforcement agency, either a local one or national one, has said, we want to thank NFL security for their help in bringing this criminal to justice. There's not a single incident of that, ever.
That's interesting.
So if they don't exist to out criminality within their leagues, well, then they have to exist to cover things up. Because what it is these guys have connections, former FBI agents, know guys back at the FBI, and I've seen this in the FBI files I have, where the NFL security will go to the FBI and say, look, we'll handle this, you guys back off, and the FBI goes, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. What could possibly go wrong? Does the FBI themselves ever investigate?
Yeah.
I mean, do they just say, fuck you? No, we're looking into it.
They're supposed to. But here's the thing, is in terms of game fixing, especially from the gambling aspect of it, sports bribery is a federal crime. If I went and tried to pay somebody to fix a game, I'm breaking a federal law. And yet the FBI, and I'm not really exaggerating, quit investigating for it in the 1980s. just like gave it up.
Really?
They basically said if something falls into our lap, and this is what's happened, like in the case of like Boston College, the big Boston College scandal from the late 70s. The only reason they found out about that was they investigated Henry Hill, who was the guy from the Goodfellas movie, and in passing he said I was up in Boston. He said I was up in Boston. They said, well, what were you doing in Boston? And Henry Hill said, oh, well, I was working with the basketball players. And it just so happened that the FBI agent was a former Boston College alum. He said, what do you mean you're working with the basketball players? He goes, we were fixing games, we were shaving some points. And that's the only reason anybody found out about it.
That's right. If they weren't looking into the mob.
And there's other incidences of that. I mean, there's University of Toledo, University of San Diego. A lot of the recent ones that have come up have all come up because of other investigations, not because they were specifically targeting, sports betting or illegal sports betting or game fixing. It's always happened just by accident, basically.
Yeah. What is the FBI's Vexum filer list, and why are you on it?
I'm not exactly sure what it is. I am on it. I'm one of 35, 38 names.
That's a very exclusive list, and that would make me very nervous.
It makes me kind of proud, really. I know some of the other guys on it. That's the funny part. Basically what it is I have made too many Freedom of Information Act requests for their liking.
You've done too much poking around.
Yeah. So what happened was my book, Larceny Games, was written because I obtained, and I'm not exaggerating, every file the FBI had related to sports bribery, to game fixing. And it was over 400 files.
Oh, wow.
Which I obtained over about a 2-year period or something. And that's when I wound up on the list. But that's what became the basis of the book, because I found stuff in there that nobody else bothered to ever look into. And what I found was that there are Hall of Fame basketball players, there are Hall of Fame football players, there are guys like Muhammad Ali, all have been involved potentially in fixing games or fixing matches.
Yeah, I was going to say the most sport that I would think that was actually fixed would be probably boxing.
That's got to be one of the easiest ones to fix. You go down. Period. You just go down.
I had no idea how incredibly corrupt boxing is, or was. I mean, if you go back to the heyday, like in the 50s, in the 60s, when they had Wednesday night fights and Friday night fights, literally, and I'm not exaggerating, one mobster, a guy by the name of Frankie Carbo, ran boxing. Ran it. He actually was in cahoots with, it's interesting, Arthur Wirtz, whose family still owns the Chicago Blackhawks, and James Norris, whose dad is the Norris Trophy in the NHL, and the Norris Division was formerly named after, because Wirtz and Norris owned Chicago Stadium, they owned part of Madison Square Garden, they owned the stadium in Detroit, the stadium in St. Louis. Carbo worked with these two guys to put on boxing matches in their arenas, and he controlled it all, and then he sold it to CBS and NBC. Wow. And yet he literally controlled the fights. Have you ever seen the movie Raging Bull?
Yeah.
There's a scene in there where this old guy comes up to Jake LaMotta and says, look, you got to throw a fight for us if you want a chance to heavy or middleweight title. Mm-hmm. That's Frankie Carbo. That really happened.
Oh, that's interesting.
And that's what he would do. And the funny thing is, I honestly believe the UFC works in the exact same way.
That's what the second thing I was going to say. I was going to ask if what you thought about the UFC.
Well, because I think it works. It's set up exactly in the same fashion. You have one guy, Dana White, in control of the whole thing. He sold the whole package to Fox, and now he has to provide entertainment for these guys. And so it's the same thing. Are you going to let it just be happenstance, or you can control it? Because we know, again, the history of boxing is just rife with match fixing, with fixing.
TV ratings is all about the money.
Exactly.
Boxing, football, basketball, we all think about those, soccer. But one that, in researching your work, one sport that I was surprised to see was one of the most betted on sports around, tennis.
Second most betted on sport in the world.
The second most. Soccer's got to be number one, I'm guessing, then.
Yep.
Tennis. How many? I for some reason I have a completely different image of a tennis bookie than the average bookie. But that is really interesting. Now, I grew up watching football, and when I was a kid, there were always bad calls or questionable plays here and there. But I feel like it's 100 times more these days. It seems like almost every game there's at least one play where everyone's like, "Oh, that was a touchdown. You kidding me? That was so clearly a touchdown." Or that wasn't a first down, and that changed the momentum of the game. Some plays that just changed the trajectory of the game. Do you think that fixing has gotten more blatant, or do you think that it's gotten worse or better?
Well, I think
or more frequent.
Early on, football didn't have to do it. There wasn't as much at stake. And I think the more that has gotten at stake, the more they, like you said earlier, they have to provide the entertainment. They have to keep people coming back for more. And so to do that, they have to make it more exciting and interesting. And I think what has helped and hurt them is like HDTV. Because like you say, in the instant replays, you can see a play where a guy clearly scored a touchdown, and yet the referee will come back after looking at it and said, yeah, I know it, he didn't score.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's going on
And
with that?
everybody at home
That's
just
always
freaks
driven me
out.
crazy.
Yeah, and yet they don't get punished for making blatantly wrong calls. In fact, a lot of times the NFL will come out and cover up for them. I mean, like, the famous Des Bryant catch last year against the Packers. And I think they intentionally have tweaked their rules and made them such a gray area and so open for interpretation that nobody knows what a catch is anymore. I mean, something as simple as a catch, a basic thing in the NFL, nobody can tell you what it is. But yet, when something like the Des Bryant play happens, the NFL, whichever way they want the game to go, can come out and say this wasn't a catch because of A, B, and C, or they could come out and say it is a catch because of X, Y, and Z. And either way, they're right. Some of the fans are going to be happy, and some are going to be unhappy.
Sure, of course.
That's the way the ball bounces.
Well, speaking of that, how much fun was it to have the replacement refs for a while? that was the strangest experience to watch those games because everybody agreed this is wacky. I mean, it was just a weird. There was so much confusion. Touchdown. No, it was an interception. No, it was out of bounds. 3 refs on one play. You could have 3 calls. I thoroughly enjoyed that, even though the Seahawks got. Well, actually, the Seahawks did pretty well.
No,
with
they came out on that. Yeah,
that Packers incident was great. But there's that famous shot where one of them's like, "No good." The other one's like, "Touchdown." Oh, it was brilliant. What was up with the power outage at the Ravens and 49ers Super Bowl back a few years ago? Because more than anything in recent years, that seems to have gotten even regular Joes talking around, at the bar about something, there might be shenanigans here. Because that completely changed the trajectory of the game. Do you think there might have been shenanigans there?
I totally do. Because like you said, I think if the game had kept going in the same way and the Ravens just wiped the field with the 49ers, then nobody would have cared about the blackout. But because when the lights came back on, it was like a 180-degree turn, and suddenly the 49ers made it competitive down to the base. I think it was like the final play of the game, or at least within the final 2 minutes.
Yeah, it was a blowout. It was a blowout before the power outage. And then, what was it, 20, 30 minutes? It was a good chunk of time. It was longer
like
than
33
halftime.
to 34 minutes, yeah.
And then all of a sudden, the 49ers make this amazing comeback. It's not crazy to think because okay, let's say the game's getting away a little. People might be tuning out. People do, especially the fair weathers or the people that just tune in to watch the commercials or an exciting game.
Out.
Yeah, and we got a lot of ads to sell.
I was literally left. My wife and I left the party. We were at, like, the
that's
game's
interesting.
over.
But they still got a lot of ads to sell. So throw the switch, change the momentum, get close within the exact few seconds. That's exactly what happened. And you wouldn't have to finesse any more than just stopping the game for half an hour, because anyone that's ever played sports knows that when you are on a momentum, you don't want to stop for a timeout, let alone a halftime break, because you lose that momentum. That's why teams, especially basketball, you'll see them throw a timeout every time that a team is on a hot streak. They want to stop that because even a few minutes can cool that hot streak.
What I find really strange about the blackout is, because I wrote a book called Disaster Government, where I looked into continuity government programs and presidential executive orders and all these sorts of things, national emergencies.
We might have to have you back for another show.
We actually had a reader ask about disaster government. They were wanting to ask you about that.
Good for them, yeah. Good for them. But in researching all this, like, Department of Homeland Security stuff, I found that they had issued numerous warnings and have done numerous scenarios about terrorists attacking something like the Super Bowl, a sporting event, a major sporting event. And I found it really curious that despite the fact that the lights went out, nobody panicked. Nobody wondered, was this some sort of terrorist attack? Because, there was rumors that, like, Anonymous was behind it and some other things. Nobody panicked, especially within the NFL. Telling part is because they know, at least if the Department of Homeland Security is being honest, they know that, obviously if you're a terrorist and you blew up the Super Bowl, that would be huge.
Yeah.
Because how many people are tuned in. So here's an event that's very close to that, at least, especially when the instant it happens. And yet, supposedly Roger Goodell never left his seat even.
Oh, wow.
And, that's what I find telling, is the fact that nobody within the NFL freaked out or panicked. Everybody's just like, oh, the lights went out, oh, well.
I've never seen this
That's what
happen. I mean, this has never happened, right? I mean, maybe it's happened in a smaller game, but how many?
There's only 2 games I know of. One was there was a 49er game on Monday Night Football where and that's when they were trying to get a new stadium, coincidence, when a big transformer outside the stadium blew up. Mm-hmm. And they caught it like on the blimp cam. And another one is a famous game between the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and Wisconsin, a football game, where somebody thinks somebody intentionally knocked the lights out there so Wisconsin didn't cover the spread.
Wow. Well, like I said, this is a topic that will drive some people insane, and some people just don't want to hear it. I mentioned I saw you on the Artie Lang show clip on YouTube, and there was an ex-NFL player there, and he was very defensive about the entire idea. But it is one of those things that if you are not in on the fix, you would think it was bullshit. I mean, because you were in it. You know, you would say, okay, I'm in this machine, and if I can see outsiders making up all this shit, it's easy for me to dismiss it. But it's sort of like if you're a good cop and your partner is a shady cop, because, again, people are good at hiding shit. The good cop would not only be shocked at the accusations of his partner being crooked, he would be offended by it because he would feel that you are attacking him on a personal level. And he knows that he's a good cop, and he prides himself on being a good cop. But you're not saying the entire sport is rigged and that everyone is in on the take, like professional wrestling, and it could just be one ref, again, who owes his ex-wife a shit ton of money and saw an opportunity to cash in. I bet there's a lot of opportunists waiting to cash in on fixing a game that nobody on the team would even be aware of.
Well, exactly, because, everybody, they're people. The referees are people, the coaches are people, players are people. They have problems, like everybody else does.
Yeah.
They have problems with their wives. They have problems, they may be homosexual and they're hiding that. They may have drug problems. They may have gambling problems, drinking problems, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of guys in the league who probably have problems. And let's face it, organized crime has learned over the years how to exploit those problems.
Yeah. And
when you think about gambling in the United States, sports gambling is entirely illegal outside of the state of Nevada, except maybe a little bit in Delaware. So you're talking 99% of the sports gambling that goes on in this country is illegal. You're talking it's maybe $80 billion up to perhaps as much as $500 billion being wagered illegally on sports every year. That's vastly a mob-controlled system with no oversight.
Yeah.
So there's all this money floating around. It's in organized crime's hand, and all they have to do is go find a weakness and exploit it. And that's what we've seen, again, if you look at soccer, we've seen this on an international scale where organized crime guys have gone out and find weaknesses and exploited them. And yet, and again, and I hate to sound like a broken record, but the United States, we're so naive. We think, these guys get paid too much, so they'll never do it. Well, they're greedy, some of them.
Sure.
They want more money. And we've seen numerous players, guys like Allen Iverson, Warren Sapp, who've made $100 million contractually and yet gone bankrupt as soon as they walked out of the game.
They Wesley Snipes it.
Yeah,
we learned everything we need to know about money by Wesley Snipes and MC Hammer. Yeah, you can be on top of the world with finances 1 minute, and in this modern age where you got to keep up with all the other celebrities, all the other famous and rich people, that could be gone in an instant. So the notion that rich and famous keeps you out of trouble, it's idiotic in the first place. If that were true, TMZ would not exist. First of all, there'd be no reason for that. Well, we did have a few listeners offer up some questions for you, Brian. Chris, you want to read a couple of those?
Yeah, definitely. Brian, David Fickencourt would like to know, in your opinion, should Pete Rose be allowed in the Hall of Fame?
No.
You don't think so?
Not at all.
Okay.
Because here's the thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
I can explain it if you want.
Yeah,
please
Because
do.
here's the thing is, first of all, besides the fact that he lied all those years, is whether you like it or not, he was manipulating games when he was gambling. Because, say, if the Reds were playing the Cubs in like a 3-game series, and Rose decided to bet on his team in the first game, they know, and they've shown it, he would go out of his way to burn through his bullpen, basically do whatever he could to win that game because he had money on it. Now you could say, well, betting on your own team, that's great, but he would do that, and then in Game 2, maybe he bet on the Reds again, and he'd do the same thing. He'd just burn through his team as much as he could to try to win that bet. And then come Game 3, he wouldn't bet on his team because he knew they were going to lose. His bullpen was worn out. And he'd essentially almost throw that game And he would be letting his bookie know that he was throwing the game because he wasn't betting on it.
Wow.
He was just
And so
really
in a very
working
real
it.
way, yeah, he was working the system, and he was kind of manipulating games just like that.
That's fair.
Yeah.
All right. Great answer. Michael Bates wants to know, and you kind of touched on this a few times already, but let's put it together in a nutshell again. How much involvement do you think crime families had in fixing games like boxing or racing?
You mean like horse racing? Horse racing is it's probably the most corrupt sport of them all.
You think so?
And if you
Wow.
like-
That's another easy
if you
one to
like-
fix, I bet.
Oh, I talked to an FBI agent who worked a lot of like horse racing fixes, and he was based in New York. He said sometimes, literally, nobody wanted to win the race because there were so many people fixing it. That horses were almost like running backwards because
God.
all the jockeys were trying not to win. They wanted the other guy to win.
Embarrassing.
That'd be adorable.
So, I mean, it's just, yeah, I mean, organized crime has a huge hand in this.
Yeah.
Wow.
And a lot of the files that I got from the FBI was related to this. It was related to, like, Boston crime families, Chicago, New York.
Some of it, that's the
Los
only way they
Angeles.
ever knew that this shit was going on, because they weren't looking into the sports. It was just happenstance that they were looking into certain mafia folk.
Stephen Moyers would like to know, what sports are the easiest and hardest to fix?
Ooh.
Well, I always thought soccer would actually be one of the hardest ones to fix, but apparently it's incredibly easy. Because the soccer guys, whether people know or not, they've been able to fix games and say, I want it to end 4-2. And they'll go out and end the game 4-2. To me, that's just amazing with soccer, considering, sometimes there's only like 4 shots on goal the entire game.
Right.
And these guys could fix it to that end. I mean, I think the easiest ones to fix are the individual ones, like tennis, boxing, that sort of thing, because you only got to get to one person.
Right.
Perhaps the hardest to fix might either be like the NHL, but nobody bets on hockey, so who cares?
Interesting.
Or baseball, because I think baseball, even if you had like a starting pitcher, if he gives up 9 runs, there's no telling that the offense won't score 10. I mean, obviously it helps,
Yeah.
but it would be a trickier one to fix. And I think like with the 1919 World Series showed you,
Right.
you'd have to have a good cross-section of players to really get the outcomes you wanted with baseball. But I think all of them can be reached, just a matter of how much.
I'm starting to think the Harlem Globetrotters might be up to shenanigans. What do you think? Someone needs
No,
to
I think they're
investigate those motherfuckers.
They're totally legit.
Yeah. We got any more, Chris?
No, and then we had one that was wanting to ask about disaster government. Maybe that'll have to be for...
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about that. We really might need to have you back on just to talk about that. I didn't know that you delved into that stuff.
Yeah, because sometimes I get sick of talking about and writing about sports.
Sure.
I just can't. I can't deal with it anymore. I just break down. In fact, I'm actually in one of those stages right now where it's like enough with the sports stuff. But I wrote that because I was always interested in like basically like secret bases, secret underground bases that supposedly existed or didn't exist, and I was always kind of interested in the plans the government had in case of a nuclear war. So kind of on the side, I did some research and Freedom of Information Act requests and stuff like that based along those lines.
Well, that's
And I was
interesting.
kind of writing it on the idea of it's going to be like a conspiracy book. And the more I researched it, I realized nobody's making any of this stuff up. It's actually real.
Yeah.
It's not a conspiracy at all. It's reality, and that's the way the book came out.
Well, is this like
But I mean, there's
one of the
I was
things?
going to say, there's a funny story
Yeah,
where
go ahead.
I did a lot of Freedom of Information Act requests, some of them to U.S. Northcom, which is, if anybody knows, the military group that's based in their zone is actually the United States, which kind of questions about, posse comitatus and some other things. I made a request back when I was writing the book. It's like around 2010, and I finally got an answer like 3 months ago from them.
Oh, wow.
It took like 5 years for them to get back to me.
We're going to put you on the top priority, let's say.
Yeah.
Well, so as far as like plans for nuclear attack, I mean, does the government have like some sort of secret bunkers all over the country, like we've heard
my
so much
God,
tell
yeah.
about?
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, they have them. I mean, there's some. The thing that bothers me is the fact that there's stuff like, you probably heard of some of them. There's like Raven Rock. There's like, what's the other one? There's another big one, Mount Weather. There's a couple others all kind of on the East Coast. And I always think if I know about them and I can find out information about them, then they're useless, which means there has to be other ones.
Right.
Because
decoys.
if you're going to use them for the purposes you're planning on, which is surviving like a nuclear attack, well, again, if someone as foolish as me can dig them up, then the Russians or whoever else can dig them up.
Sure.
That means you got to have an alternate to that alternate, and the question is, where is that one?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but like Raven Rock, if you have enough money, you could get in, right? It's like it's set up where, like, if you have a couple $1 billion, you could get yourself in there and they'll hunker you in. If
That's kind of one of the rumors, yeah. I mean, whether it's true or not, I don't know, because I don't have a couple $1 billion to throw that
right.
way,
Well,
but
no, it's like it's huge. I mean, on a scale, it's the grand scale of the place.
Wow,
is
that
huge.
sounds like the setup of a good episode of The Twilight Zone. Where you were rich enough to buy yourself surviving the Holocaust, but the real interesting shit would be what happens when you crawl out of those shelters, you know? That's what would be great in the Twilight Zone episode.
We should totally do a show on that one, actually. That's a pretty phenomenal thing. The whole place is self-containing, you know, so it's got like its own food, its own water supply, you know, its own hydroponic, you know, food setup. It's insane.
Well, I always wonder about these stories about government. You know, it doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, if you think about it, Air Force One has like what, an escape pod? If I learned anything from Escape from New York, there's something. There's shit. We have plans in store in case something really goes down to protect our important people. I'm sure that goes all the way down to just the super rich. You know, it starts with the top politicians, goes all the way down to maybe some of the top military, then down to super rich, and maybe Kanye is in there some way. I don't know. We can't know. But
well, you know, you can join it. There is something called it's the National Defense Executive Reserve, and anybody can actually sign up for it.
And you just are a volunteer to repopulate the earth?
You're like the civilian replacements for if the government gets wiped out.
Huh.
I never went as far as to join it, but I actually have like the entry forms for it.
Do you get a badge?
I found it right in the book. And yeah, you can, I mean, anybody, if you look it up, it's the National Defense Executive Reserve. There's actually forms you could fill out and join. And they actually held like training sessions and stuff too, supposedly.
That is really interesting.
So,
I've never heard anything like that. I've heard lots of stories about the elite having, you know, special places to while the world dies that they can survive. I've never heard of anything where you can, like, a legitimate organization that anybody can join. Is it like Lyle said, a certain amount of money, or is it just?
No, it's. I think it was kind of free. I think you just had to volunteer like X amount of hours a year or so.
Huh. Well, that sounds interesting.
Wonder what kind of list signing up for that gets you on.
And the funny thing is
I'd
they
pick up
want
trash
stuff
to get on
like they want like mechanics and like ordinary people.
No graphic designers needed in the afterworld.
Damn it! Very well may. I don't know.
Someone's got to make the flyers. Well, Brian, I would love to have you back on the show sometime to talk about that, because I think we covered a lot of the stuff on the sports that I wanted to get to, but this sounds like a whole different show ready to happen. Now, remind me the name of that book. Is that your more recent book?
That I got to remember. It was 2013. That's when I came out with it. So that was called Disaster Government, National Emergencies, Continuity Government, and You.
Oh, that's a whole episode. I would love to have you back on for that if you're game sometime in the near future.
I might have to reread the book, though, because, again, the sports stuff just gets stuck in my head too much. I got to knock it out.
We'll get a copy of it, and we'll give that away for news stories on a future episode.
We'll do a quick question, though, for you guys.
Okay.
And this is 2 years old, so it's probably pretty much the same. How many national emergencies is the United States currently operating under?
National emergencies.
Oh, God. Currently? Complete guess.
Currently it's a 2013. Because
I'd say 3.
I'm going to go with 10.
I would say,
I'm going to say 15.
You're all under. It's 25.
Wow.
25. Really?
And the scary part is, and again, this would be the whole other show, but the scary part is just one national emergency really allows the president to overthrow the federal government if he should choose.
Ooh, that is an interesting thought.
Think about that for a little while. Yeah.
What are you waiting for, Obama? What's your real game? That is fucking scary. I don't think I've ever put that together. That's an excellent point to start off with. And on that note, I think we should put that on a teaser. Let's get in touch very soon, Brian, to discuss that, because there's some interesting shit there that I'd love to get down to.
Yeah, there's some weirdness in there, definitely.
But until then, where can people follow you online?
The best place was my website, which is thefixesin.net. And then I'm also like on Twitter and on Facebook. But the fixesin.net will lead you to my books. It'll lead you to Amazon. It'll lead you to the Twitter and the Facebook and all the other nonsense.
Okay. Good stuff. Well, I have only one question left. Do you watch sports at all to enjoy them, or is it strictly from sort of an analyzing and research position? Like, you wouldn't have gone down this road if you weren't initially a sports fan.
Exactly. I mean, I started out as one, but now, no. I can't watch a game. And that's what kind of bothers me. Is it's like I have to pay attention if I'm going to write about this stuff, but at the same time, I don't want to pay attention to it because it ultimately doesn't matter. I mean, it's really what it is, and I don't fault people for watching. I just try to make them more educated about doing so. It's like, look, if you want to be entertained for 3 hours and you don't want to watch a movie or you don't want to be keeping up with the Kardashians and you want to watch sports, that's cool, but don't make it your life. Don't make it all you care about and ignore the other important things in your life.
Oh, people have heart attacks.
Chances are,
heart attacks over these games.
This stuff is just entertainment. That's all it is.
Well, if you think about it more, I think that's a good tie to Kim Kardashian. If you think about it as reality television, well, we all know reality television is about as real as fucking Knots Landing. There's a timely reference for you. By the way.
The thing is, though, you say that. I don't think everybody does know that. That's the scary part.
You're right. I guess you're right, because if they did ultimately know that, they wouldn't hang on to these shows with such passion. That's depressing. I'm depressed now. You know, it kind of reminds me.
I told you at the beginning this would happen.
It's a good depressed, though. There's a good depressed and there's a bad depressed. It's kind of why I don't follow politics anymore, because I mean, there's some local things I will vote for, referendums and initiatives, and there's some things that I'll vote for, mayors. On a national level, I am so uninterested, because I feel like over the years I've done my own research, I've seen enough things to just make me feel like the government is the WWF, that everything is scripted and bought and paid for, and I've lost interest in it, and I used to be so passionately interested in like a good presidential debate, or I'm going to go through and I'm going to read every initiative before I vote. You know, I was proud and excited to vote, and now I see those voter pamphlets come through the mail. I'm like, fuck off. What's the point? I'm so disenchanted, disenfranchised on every level with our American government, and maybe this is the first step for me becoming that way with sports. So thanks a lot, asshole. Thanks, Brian. Glad you could join us.
No problem.
But it's true though, because I can still. It's funny because I believe a lot of this. I have no problem. I'm not one of these skeptical people when it comes to fixed sports. I personally think you're a little silly if you don't buy into it. I think you're kind of taking the long way around to think that this is a ridiculous notion. But at the same time, I still want to watch the Seahawks this Sunday. I still want to root for my team, and I still want to feel like there's some magic in there. But I guess ultimately, I'm probably better off just going and watching a local C Squad team play basketball, because at least that's probably not fixed.
But the thing is, they do have done, psychological studies that basically say, there's this thing called basking in reflective glory, or berging, they called it. And basically what it is you as a person feel good if the team you root for does well.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of people tune in. And that's why if you listen to sports radio, and it's funny because after I learned this, the more I heard it, the more I laughed, is when people will call into a sports radio show, and if they're talking about the Seahawks, they'll say we. Well, you're not on the team, goofy.
Yes, we do.
And what they'll do is,
yes, we are.
When the team
shut your mouth.
People will say they.
Yeah.
They'll distance themselves from a lot. They'll say they need to do better. But a lot of times they'll say we. They think they're part of the team.
You're right. It's the camaraderie thing. Well, like I said, when we... wow, I immediately did it. When we won the Super Bowl, boy, do I feel like a cunt after going right into saying that with we. Yep. But when the Seahawks won the Super Bowl, we as a state got to see shit that we never saw before, and that ties back into the money. I mean, I kept thinking it is a big deal when your city wins the Super Bowl. We saw that for the first time. We saw the Super Bowl parade. We saw businesses having Super Bowl specials, and some of the Seahawks were showing up for appearances, and we had celebrity and Pearl Jam playing secret shows or whatever. It was Seattle mania, and everything from the top down was benefiting from that. And it was really inspiring and exciting to see that. But looking at it from this side of the wall, it's like you can also see why it really pays to maybe pay to have this happen to your city. It's an amazing thing if your city can win the Super Bowl, ladies and gentlemen. You should try it because, like I said, I had no idea. None of us had any idea. We'd never won a Super Bowl before. There I go saying we again.
Psychologically, I've never thought about it that way, but it does make sense. It really does.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of pat on your own back.
Well, I guess we should get out of here on that depressing note. Although, maybe depressing isn't the right word. Because it is funny because the we and they thing is so true. And even the fix thing is so true. Like I said, the Super Bowl that the Hawks won, didn't want to hear anything about rigging. The very next year, I'm open for discussion. I'm listening. I believe that somebody.
Remember, you guys got screwed out of with this Pittsburgh.
Oh God, now that if you want to talk about something being paid off, now that was a reference.
Now quickly jump on, right?
See, we're back in it. We're back in it.
But that is one of the funniest things, though, about doing this.
We're fucking idiots, aren't we? This is ridiculous.
But it's hilarious because I can talk to somebody, just even somebody I just met. And I could go on and on about this. I'll be like, I can see that. I can agree with you. And then I hit upon their team.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll freak out.
Slow down, cowboy.
Whoa.
And then they'll be like, whoa.
We're out of time, Brian.
My team was legitimate when they won. That was legitimate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure. If you believe any of it, you got to believe all of it. And I guess the real depressing part is I find it all too easy to believe. When you get right down to it, no problem believing it, and that's the bummer. But anyway, let's get on out of here. Brian, thanks so much for joining us. Find him what website one more time.
ThefixIsin.net.
And we'll get you back on very soon. I want to talk about this government shit. That sounds like that really sounds
that's
more
some heavy-duty stuff.
Yeah.
Of course, then you might even get more depressed.
Well, like I said, I couldn't possibly be more disenfranchised or more disillusioned by democracy, shall I say. Love the country, love the freedom that we're enjoying now, but can't ruin me there. I'm sure you can teach me a lot of things, but you can't ruin me in terms of
sailed.
Yeah,
Ron's jaded.
I am very. I'm not an anti-government person. I just don't believe in them. I don't believe in any of I am convinced. If I'm convinced of anything in this crazy mixed-up world, it's that the very last thing the U.S. government cares about is the American people. You'll never convince me otherwise. So after I was able to convince myself of that, anything else just goes. It's like, pile it on top of it.
Yeah.
We'll keep you posted on that. So thanks for joining us, Brian. Tune in next week. We will be talking about 9/11. Log into the spacepod.yugu.com, join our forum, and find us on Facebook. Other than that, tune in next week, 9/11.
See you next week.
Oh my God, it's re-entering my atmosphere.